Baruch Hashem, Jesus Yeshua HaMashiach. God bless Israel and the Jewish people, and all of you tuning in now. Broadcasting live from Bali, Indonesia. Welcome to OMEGAMAN with flagship broadcast will begin in a few moments. Grab your Bible and coffee and get ready for Speak My Word. Listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. Jehovah hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver hath he hid me. You are listening to OMEGAMAN with Shannon Ray Davis.
All right, everybody, that time has arrived. I want to give you a few extra minutes to get in over here. And we got a really exciting show for you tonight. We're welcoming back James Trimm. He is a Bible scholar. He's an author, podcaster. And we're really blessed to have him back. And today for the archive is Monday, July 6th, 2026. Brother James, welcome back, my friend. How are you doing? Uh-oh. Let's make sure you're not muted. You may be muted. Check and see. Click on that. Wait a minute, James. Hold on a second. Click on that little mute button on the neck wire. It goes down. It may be blinking or solid. Click that. Oh, there you go. Okay, that unmutes you. Okay, good.
Okay.
Praise the Lord.
I don't know how I got muted.
It's okay. So you got a couple buttons. You got that one. And then you got a plus and minus if the volume is too loud or too low for you. You can adjust it with that neck wire. Well, James, welcome back, my friend. Would you like to open up this show in prayer?
Sure. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Yahweh, King of the universe, who has blessed us and given us your Torah and the Tanakh and the writings of the ancient Nazarenes, the Ketuvim Nezirim, and the Mashiach, and the opportunity to come together and study your word together. B'Shem Yeshua Meshikenu, in the name of Yeshua the Messiah, Amen.
So, I am very interested in the subject of Hebrew. In fact, I've set it as a goal, if I have enough time, I want to become literate in biblical Hebrew and actually be able to open up the Hebrew scriptures and read them for myself without relying on my King James English translation. So that's going to be a daunting task for me, but I think it'll be rewarding. And so, James, I was in the Word of God a couple months back, and I looked up Amen or Amen. I've heard it pronounced many ways in Hebrew, and in Hebrew it said it means "so be it." Is that right?
That's a reasonable approximation. It's Amen comes from the from the root Aleph Mem Nun, and it's the same root as the word faith, emunah. and it expresses sort of a faithfulness, Elohim's faithfulness, if you will. Um, so yeah, it's I've seen on the internet some people go nuts, trying to come up with connections between Amen and the Egyptian god Ammon, but the reality is the word Amen appears throughout the scriptures, so it's not a pagan origin.
Well, there was a great movie back it was like 85 with Richard Gere called King David. And I really liked it. Of course, I really like House of David, the TV series. I'm waiting for series 3.
I've enjoyed both. In fact, I really loved a scene at the beginning of the Richard Gere movie. It's extra biblical, but it was really well done at the opening scene where Samuel comes to see Saul, and he approaches he comes to the entrance of the palace, and the guards block his way, and they say the king is engaged in the affairs of state. And Samuel says, "Since when do the affairs of state come before the affairs of God?" And the guards back off and let him in, and he goes in, and Saul is interrogating the Agag, the king of the mountain. He had been instructed not to let him live, and Samuel comes around and recounts how the people came to him wanting a king, and Samuel had told them, "God is our king," and they said, "We want a king we can see." Well, he takes Saul's sword and he chops off Agag's head, and he takes the head and he thrusts it in front of Saul, and he says, "This is a king you can see," and he throws it at his feet.
Man, that was an awesome movie. And fast forward to David has taken the head off or he's getting ready to cut off the head of Goliath. He's killed him with a stone, and he pulls the sword up over his head. And he says, "So be it," and then chops his head off. And that's where I said, when I looked up Amen in Hebrew, I said, wait a minute, I remember that from the film. It makes sense now, so be it.
Amen.
The Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name. I found out that hallowed means holy. There's so much richness and levels that we don't see in the English many times, but you're going to find on the Hebrew. So I want to do a deep dive. Of course, we can go anywhere you want tonight. But if you're just joining us, welcome. We've got James Trimm back. Now, I found out about Brother James when I was looking on YouTube, James, to see if I could locate any channels that were talking about the discovery of the Hebrew Gospels and many more books of what we know as the Hebrew New Testament now. And I came across Al Garza, Nehemiah Gordon, Miles Jones, and I came across your channel. And that's how I found out about you. And I found out you and Brother Al Garza worked together for many years on projects, and you're actively involved in, recovering the Hebrew gospel. So I want to delve into that a little bit tonight. But before I do, are you Gentile or are you Jewish? Give us a little background on yourself.
So I'm Jewish. My wife and I have been, we've been married for 36 years on July 15th coming up here.
Oh,
now,
congratulations. Yes.
I say 36 years. We count from the day we met because we married 1 year to the day after the day we met. And we didn't know it at the time. It wasn't until a few years later, my wife was looking back at her diary and reading the entry for the day that we met and realized that it was our anniversary and that we had actually married 1 year to the day after we met. So technically 35 years, but we counted as 36 because we've been together for 36 years. And she's the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor.
Wow.
I could give my, background on how I became a believer in Messiah. It's a story. I think I probably gave it last time. So,
well, I want to know a little bit more about you because I figured as much that you had to have been raised in a Jewish family to have had a love for Hebrew. Now, did you
Not
speak Hebrew?
exactly. Not
Tell me
exactly.
how you learn Hebrew.
Okay. I studied Hebrew from a young age, probably from 14. I started learning Hebrew, and then I became a believer in Messiah in around 1984, 85, and then it must have been 84, I think. And in 1988, I came in contact with Rabbi Armand Danny Moyal. Uh, Rabbi Moyal was an Orthodox rabbi from Israel who had come to become a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah from studying the Midrashim, the Talmud, the Zohar, etc. And he was teaching Hebrew, and so I started studying Hebrew under him and studying everything else under him. He was a mentor to me, and then after that, after he moved away, I studied under Rabbi Herbert J. Gilner, who was an Orthodox rabbi from Brooklyn, who was not a believer in the Messiah, but who didn't have a problem with the fact that I was.
So were both your parents Jewish?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I have some Jewish ancestry, possibly on both sides. But that's why I took exception. I wasn't raised Jewish. I When I was about 12 years old, I came in contact with. I got involved with a group of friends. I joined a science club at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, and for young people, and it ranged in age. I was one of the youngest on up to college age students, and many of them were Jewish, and I was hanging out with them. And when Sabbath came, everybody would gather around and light candles for Shabbat, the Erev Shabbat. And when Sabbath ended, we did Havdalah, and it all just seemed very natural to me. And I was going to synagogue with them, and people said, "You look Jewish. Are you Jewish?" Well, my mother was a genealogist, so I went home and I asked my mother if we had Jewish ancestry, and in fact, we did. A line of called the Vineyard family, who came here from Germany. Vineyard is what they called it when they changed their name in the United States. It was the Weiner family.
Oh, okay.
A nice Jewish name from Germany. And so I, at the age of 12, I would say, became very deeply involved in Judaism and started going to synagogue. And I became a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah when I was 18.
Now, how long did it take you once you set to learn Hebrew to actually get competent in it, to be able to read, and then later even to speak it?
So, first of all, I can read Hebrew, and I can speak it after a fashion. I'm not fluent in Hebrew. And to be fluent in a language, you have to be able to. There's a difference between being able to read it and being able to pick it up real time as somebody speaking it. Because
well, sure.
if you're reading it,
people
you take your own pace.
Practice.
But if somebody's speaking, and then I haven't. When I don't speak it as well as I used to, because Rabbi Moyal, when I was studying under him, he didn't know much English, and I didn't know much Hebrew. We had to work it out between the two of us. He knew French. He was born in French Morocco, and brought to Israel as an orphan child. So he was fluent in French, Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, but not so much in English. He knew some English, and I knew some Hebrew, and he was teaching me Hebrew, and so it challenged me to communicate, challenge each of us. And in those days, my Hebrew was probably better than it is now because I've had less of an opportunity to speak it. And when you're doing a language vocally, like I said, you have to take it in at the speed somebody's speaking. And if you didn't catch
Right.
it, then, either you have to ask them to repeat themselves. But if you're reading, you can pick it up at your own speed as you're reading along.
Oh, for
So,
sure. I can appreciate that. And it always helps to have somebody to practice it with. And there's nothing like immersion.
exactly.
It's one thing to be able to read it, but being able to practice it really helps to maybe go to a country where everybody's speaking. When I learned Spanish, it became a necessity because I found myself in Central America and people weren't speaking English. I said, I got to get up to speed and quick. So through immersion, I was able to pick up a level of street Spanish, and I can survive even today. But, I'm in Indonesia now. There's nobody to practice Spanish with, much less Hebrew. So, yeah, I've got my
You're rusty. You get rusty, don't you?
you get real rusty, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I got my work cut out for me because it would be a lot better if I lived in Israel wanting to learn Hebrew and I could just practice with people. But, folks, I'm excited to have James Trimm on. And if you're just listening to the MP3 later, I'll put in the notes his websites and YouTube, so forth. But you can find him on Rabbi Trimm on YouTube, and that's how I found you. And just looking at your channel today, you've been posting a lot on a thing called the Hebrew Matthew. So my belief is, James, that evidence is building that very possibly many, maybe most of the New Testament books were originally penned in Hebrew. Now, we've always been taught it was Greek, and that's the end of the story, and then they translated to English. But I heard about the discovery of, Hebrew Matthew, and then there are groups out there that claim to have also many of the other books. And so this is something that you study on a regular basis, and you've went out there to look for these manuscripts. What do you say to that statement that maybe in truth, most of the New Testament was originally penned in Hebrew? What have you discovered in your research so far?
Well, I would say Hebrew and Aramaic. The Tanakh, the Old Testament, was written in Hebrew and Aramaic. Much of the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic. Now, Aramaic and Hebrew are very similar languages, like, say, Spanish and Portuguese. And they're so similar that the book of Daniel starts out in Hebrew, and then without warning, it shifts into Aramaic. And for much of the book, it's in Aramaic, and then it shifts back to Hebrew. Same book. So I think the New Testament was also written in Hebrew and Aramaic, and I think the entire New Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic, not just the Gospels. And we have I've written a whole book on this, by the way. It's called Unveiling the Hebrew and Aramaic Origins of the New Testament, available on Amazon. And one of the most evident, one of the books we have great evidence for is the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is written in terrible Greek. If you turned it into your Greek professor as Greek that you'd written, he'd hand it back to you with red marks all over it. The grammar is awful. It's been called some of the worst Greek that has ever been written.
Really?
Grammatical monstrosities, mismatching cases, and feminines and masculines and whatnot, all mixed and jumbled up. It's case endings that don't match. It's terrible. But what I have discovered is that it's terrible Greek because it's wonderful Hebrew. And if we look behind the Greek and translate it back into Hebrew, we can see a lot of these grammatical errors were because the Greek translator was translating the Hebrew too literally and ignoring Greek grammar and preserving the Hebrew grammar. And in fact, I think the evidence indicates that it was written in Hebrew, translated to Aramaic, and then from Aramaic to Greek. Uh, so I believe that this is true for the entire New Testament, by the way, even Paul's writings. People will say to me, well, do you think Paul was, writing, why don't you think Paul was writing in Greek? And I said, well, do you think that because he was writing to these different, like the Thessalonians or whatever, I said, well, do you think he wrote the Romans in Latin? Do you think he wrote to the Galatians in Gaulish? So
Good point.
there are places in Paul's writings, in Ephesians, for example, where there are word plays in the text that only make sense in Hebrew and Aramaic and don't make sense in Greek. And the word play is actually pivotal for what Paul is actually saying. His thought transitions on a word play that doesn't even work in Greek. So
Okay. So let me ask a basic question. 2,000 years ago, time frame we're talking about. How did they write back then? Were they using these scrolls that we see rolled up? Did they have bound books?
2,000 years ago?
Sure. So in the times, let's say in the time of Paul and the apostles, what were they writing on back then? Because I've heard about scrolls, and I've heard about a thing called the Codex. I'm a little bit confused.
So they were writing, they were writing on scrolls. However, the Codex came out probably about that time. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, are all scrolls, not codices. A codex is kind of like a book. It was the next step before a book. So it has leaves that are pages like we have in a book versus a scroll, which is obviously all rolled up. And the codex was much more convenient because if you wanted to look at Isaiah chapter 30, you didn't have to scroll through the whole scroll trying to get to chapter 30. Rolling the text, you could just flip pages to get to page 30.
Okay, so it was like basically a stack of pages.
Yeah.
And
bound
would these
together.
be bound together with like a spine?
Yeah, bound together.
Okay.
With like a sewn leather cord at the in the spine holding them together. And
Codex is that
Codex was almost
synonymous? Is that also what a sefer is? A book? Is that just Hebrew for codex?
Well, no, sefer is not Hebrew for codex. Sefer means book, but it also means record because it comes. It could refer to a scroll. It's a book in the sense of the, if you might think of the content of the book. Because there are related words to that root that mean communication or numbers. So sefer means an account. Could be translated an account.
Going with trying to quantify what it would have looked like back then. Now I understand you had the scrolls and you had these books. When you're searching for evidence of the New Testament in Hebrew, what will you be looking for? Would you find scrolls, codex books, or a combination of both? And have you found any to back up?
We haven't found any scrolls, but we have found codices, and we have found manuscripts, printed manuscripts. So there's several avenues, several approaches to the issue. One is to look for Hebrew manuscripts. We have Hebrew manuscripts for Matthew, Hebrew manuscripts of note. Okay, we have Hebrew manuscripts for the entire New Testament. Okay, but the vast majority of these Hebrew manuscripts, that many of which have just come to light in recent years, are demonstrably translations from the Greek or from the Latin Vulgate or even from the Aramaic Peshitta into Hebrew that were made in medieval times. Um, uh, the vast majority of them, it's easy to demonstrate that they are not, they play no part in gospel origins. And unfortunately, some of these that can be demonstrated to play no part in gospel origins have developed a fanfare of people that think that they're the originals.
Okay.
So just because we have a Hebrew manuscript doesn't mean that it has anything to do with gospel origins. However, we do have a number of manuscripts that do look like they play some part in gospel origins. We have, we'll start with Matthew. We have the Dutele Hebrew version of Matthew. Well, let's call it the Old Hebrew version of Matthew. That's what Schoenfield called it. And that's what I like to call it. That way it represents a whole group of manuscripts or texts that agree. So there was a Hebrew Matthew that was published in 1537 by Sebastian Münster, who was a Hebraist, a Gentile Hebraist, who published this Hebrew text of Matthew that he said in the preface that he obtained from among the Jews. And then one of his students published this almost identical Hebrew text of Matthew in 1551 with marginal notes offering alternate readings from other Hebrew copies of Matthew in his possession. And then in 1553, the Talmud was banned in Rome, and the Catholic troops, if you will, were rummaging through Jewish homes and synagogues and carrying out anything that looked like a Talmud, which was anything to them that was written in Hebrew letters, to the fires and to burn them in the streets. And there was a bishop named Jean Dutele who was visiting from France, who knew Hebrew, and who saw a manuscript of Hebrew Matthew heading for the fires, and he rescued it and brought it back to France and deposited it in the library there where it still is today, Hebrew Manuscript 132 at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, France. And he published that Hebrew text in 1553, and it's very similar. Almost, it's clearly of the same pedigree, if you will. You know, different scribal variations as it's been copied over centuries, but the same basic Hebrew text. And then in a manuscript that Al Garza located, and so when Garza and I were working together, and there's no negative problems between Garza and I, just that our relationship ended on good terms. Let me just put it that way. We're fine. But he was tracking down Hebrew manuscripts, and he would bring them to me for analysis. So he'd find where a Hebrew manuscript had been published or had been, I won't say published, had been documented, released to the public in some way, photographed, maybe put online, and he would get a PDF file of such manuscripts and send them to me to do analysis on. Well, he sent me this one manuscript. It was a manuscript of Matthew through Luke chapter 17, and very exciting. Because when I looked at this, most of the manuscripts that I was getting, I would do the analysis on, and I'd say, everywhere where this differs from the normal text, it agrees with the Vulgate. So it's clearly a translation of the Latin Vulgate, or, I could tell that it was a translation of some standard version, and it wasn't the original, and or playing any part in gospel origins. But this one was different. This one was a manuscript of the same type as the Du Tillet and Münster texts. This was another witness of the old Hebrew text, but unlike those, it was a manuscript of Matthew, Mark, and Luke through chapter 17. Now, the preface material indicates that the scribe was intending to copy a manuscript of the entire four Gospels, but for whatever reason, he never finished. And so maybe he died, maybe he lost interest, whatever happened, he only finished copying through Luke chapter 17. So this manuscript only goes through Luke 17, which is tantalizing because the manuscript that it was copied from was all the rest of Luke and John that we don't have. And it has a colophon at the end of the manuscript that indicates that it was hidden in caves and that it was brought to light by Jews who had hidden their testimonies.
Because I think it's important to note, there was a lot of persecution back then. And if you were caught with one of these Hebrew scrolls or books, you could be executed by the Catholic Church. Is that true?
Possibly, yeah, well, yes. But at this point in time, that wasn't the case because there is a date on this manuscript. It's encoded in Kabbalistic code, but it's fairly simple to decipher, and it's dated 1601.
But we know that there was an Inquisition.
It's copied, but it's also copied from a prior manuscript, and we don't know what the date of that manuscript was because we don't have it.
But there was definitely a purge underway, the Inquisition.
Yeah.
Shem Tov, he found himself in Spain at a time where to be Jewish could be a death sentence. And what was the story about these challenges that would go forth?
Yeah, they would forced debates. Jews would be forced to engage in debates with that they were expected to lose, and if they won, it wouldn't go well with them.
And if you lost, you got executed, right?
No, well, no. I think if you won, you got executed.
Let me backtrack a minute. So I first heard that there may be Hebrew manuscripts of the New Testament through the work of Nehemiah Gordon, who was asked by Michael Rood just to go over there and investigate some of the passages in Matthew. And the word I got was Nehemiah was up there at Hebrew University, and he finds, and he wasn't looking for it until he was asked to get involved in this project, but he finds Hebrew manuscripts of many of the New Testament books. And then I know he's mentioned he found some in the Vatican junk box, and then we hear about the British had them in their museums.
Yeah. As I said, there are many Hebrew manuscripts that are obvious, but my research shows that most of these are translations of, say, the Latin Vulgate or something of that nature that are easy to determine don't play any part in Hebrew origins of the New Testament. Whereas with Du Tillet, for example, there are a number of telltale signs of its significance. One is that in Matthew chapter 1, we have this genealogy of Yeshua. And the genealogy that's laid out in Matthew chapter 1 tells us that it's presenting to us three groups of 14 names, which is significant because the opening phrase says that he's Messiah, the son of Avraham, the son of David. Son of David, the son of Avraham. Go backwards. Son of David, the son of Avraham. And David has a numerical value of 14. And it presents 3 sets of 14 names, and 14 times 3 is 42. 42 is the gematria for Eloah, so God. So it's showing that he's the son of David, the son of 14, and the son of 42 by presenting these 3 lists of 14 names. The problem is the third list in the Greek New Testament and in the Aramaic even, the Peshitta and the Old Syriac even, only has 13 names in the last list, except in the Hebrew of the Deuteronomy text, there are 14 names in the last list, and the missing name is Avner in verse 13, and it's right next to Avihud, and Avihud and Avner in Hebrew look a great deal alike. So a scribe looked up to the wrong name as he was copying and skipped inadvertently Avner, ended up with 13 names in his list. The interesting thing is that Dalet, D, and Resh, R, look alike in Hebrew. Okay, R and D don't look alike in English, but Resh and Dalet are very similar. It's a very common scribal error for a scribe to miscopy them. And in the Old Syriac, the name is not Avihud, but Avihur. So it's even closer. The Old Syriac is a 4th century Aramaic version of the 4 Gospels. So when I say 4th century, the manuscript is from the 4th century. There are other unique agreements between the Old Syriac and the Old Hebrew version that I've been talking about, and where they even agree in grammatical errors, if you will. So that they're very closely aligned to one another, and they shouldn't be, because the Old Syriac was lost from ancient times until it was rediscovered in the 19th century. So if some Jews created a Hebrew Matthew in the Middle Ages out of whole cloth, they wouldn't have had these agreements with the Old Syriac. There's other evidence in the Deuteronomy, so much that I can't even go into all of it. It's in my book, but one of them is that Jerome talks about the Barabbas. So we read in our Gospels that there was this guy named Barabbas, and there was Pilate ended up releasing this guy named Barabbas, or which is in Hebrew, if you just directly transliterate it, Bar Abba, the son of the father, or son of a father. But Jerome says that in the Hebrew Matthew that he had, it didn't say Barabbas, but the son of their master. And the Deuteronomy Hebrew says Bar Rabban, which is the son, or Bar Rabbah, sorry, the son of a master, not the son of, not Bar Abba. So the Deuteronomy text agrees with what Jerome says the Hebrew had.
Now, the early church fathers, didn't many of them go on record to state that, at minimum, the book of Matthew was originally written in Hebrew?
Several of the church fathers said that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew. 3 of them, as I recall, said that the book of Hebrews was originally written in Hebrew. And Epiphanius gives an account that indicates that the Jewish believers in Messiah believed that Luke and John were written in Hebrew, even though Epiphanius disagreed. And of course, Luke would also include Acts. So there is testimony from the church fathers to this degree. There's also a tremendous amount of internal evidence in the Greek texts of these books that indicate an underlying Hebrew text.
Base text. Okay.
Yeah, Hebrew source, Hebrew or Aramaic. Hebrew and Aramaic are very similar languages. Greek is very different. So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
By the way, if you're just joining us, we're live with James Trimm. We're talking about the Hebrew New Testament at this moment. And if you got a question at any juncture, you can put it in the chat room and we'll pose a question for James. So, James,
Also, go ahead.
go ahead. You first.
I have a Substack I wanted to let people know about.
Oh, tell
It's
us.
James Scott Trimm, Trimm with 2 M's, all one word, .substack.com. So I invite everybody to check out my Substack.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that.
There's a paid level, but there's a lot of free material as well. A lot of free material.
Okay. I'm going to put that in the show notes, and we'll type it in the chat room, too. That's right. I was trying to put up all the things I could locate for you, and I forgot that. That's very important. I love Substack. So, James, sometime back, I don't know when it was, it popped up on my radar bar, at least a year ago, I heard about this discovery of the Cochin, India, Hebrew New Testament. And I'm thinking, the New Testament made it all the way in Hebrew to India? What's the story on Cochin?
Okay. Let me pull my notes up on this. I have actually there's an appendix in my book unveiling the Hebrew and Aramaic origins of the New Testament on the Cochin manuscripts.
Because I think there was a biblical archaeologist. He found himself in India, and there was a synagogue over there. Now, we know that the tribes of Israel and the Jewish people were dispersed all over the world, Babylon, Europe. So it leads credence to the fact that where the Jews would be, you may find a synagogue and maybe manuscripts. So is that how that came about?
So there's a group of Christians in India called the St. Thomas Christians. And according to the church fathers, Thomas came to India. And in fact, there's a book called The Acts of Thomas about this, apocryphal Acts of Thomas. But Thomas came to India and founded a congregation there. And some of the church fathers talk about how he brought Hebrew Matthew to India. However, the Cochin manuscripts are problematic. When I examined them, I found that, well, first of all, the thing that gets pointed to in the Cochin manuscripts, one of the things has to do with the lintel of the temple being broken and forced asunder. But when I examine the text, it's actually a literal translation of the Peshitta and Old Syriac Aramaic, which has that same reading. And when I examined the Cochin text of the Gospels, I found that it continually followed the reading of the Peshitta and was apparently a revision, a paraphrase of the Peshitta Aramaic text. In fact, in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, the Cochin text retains the Aramaic Dalet prefix to the name of Yeshua that it had to have come from Aramaic, not from Hebrew. And then in Matthew chapter 1, 20 and 24, where the phrase, I am the Lord appears, it's literally a transliteration of the Syriac word for Lord. So
what do you think happened?
So I think it's a translation of the Peshitta into Hebrew.
Okay.
Which doesn't tell us a whole lot about Hebrew origins.
Peshitta being what? The
Peshitta
Syriac?
The Peshitta is the Syriac standard version of the New Testament that's used by Nestorians and by Jacobites, by the Syrian Orthodox Church and the Holy Assyrian Catholic Church of the East.
I'll tell you, we got to get up to speed, folks, tuning in out there with some of these terms, because we got Peshitta, we got the Septuagint, we got the Latin Vulgate. This is important to know our history. And you know what I appreciate about you, James, and the others that are researching this is, you're not trying to force this. You're looking at the evidence, and if it's Hebrew translated from the Greek, you let people know that.
See, I would love for these to tell me more about Hebrew origins, but they don't.
Sure. Who do you think's got them? Got most of them? You think they're in the bowels of the Vatican?
Yeah, I think that they're probably copies of the bowels of the Vatican. Now we do have some potentially original manuscripts, or if you know, no, we don't have original manuscripts of anything, but even the Tanakh, there's no originals. But we have manuscripts that seem to descend from the original text, or for which a good argument can be that they descend from the original, from Matthew, Mark, Luke through chapter 17, the book of Hebrews. So we do have those in Hebrew. We have Aramaic for almost the entire New Testament. And we have the 4th century Old Syriac Aramaic that is very close agreement with the Deutele Hebrew Matthew, and for which there's a good deal of evidence for that it is more original. I cover this in detail with examples in my book.
Well, what would be closer to the originals when we're talking the New Testament? The Aramaic or Syriac or the Greek?
The Aramaic.
Right.
And for Revelation, so far, I've only found Greek, but the Greek is it's the one book that the Hebrew is extremely evident. In fact, I'm working on a project to restore the Hebrew just from the Greek, because the Greek is so bad.
You mean like reverse engineer?
Reverse engineer, yeah.
And that's
for most books, you couldn't necessarily do that. But for Revelation, the Greek is so bad because it's following Hebrew grammar that it's actually quite easy for me to see the Hebrew behind it and put the Hebrew back together again. So
now I know of up to 2 groups. I won't mention the name because I'm not here to conflict with anybody. I'm here to learn as a student, but that's why I'm asking these questions, because I don't know the answers. But there's 2 groups out there, one in South Africa and one in the States, that have recently released a Hebrew translation of the book of Revelation. So I'm just curious, what are they using as the Hebrew text of Revelation to be able to do that?
So they're using these manuscripts that I indicated appear to be, and it's very easy for Revelation to see that these manuscripts that they're using aren't the original, because the original is so evident from the Greek that when they and I have, again, for example, the Cochin Hebrew Revelation.
Yes.
I have an appendix in my book on this. So it's not the sort of thing that makes for good radio.
Okay, sure.
The minutia, but there are places where you can look at the Greek and you can say, and I can lay it out. So I lay it out so even somebody that doesn't know the languages can understand it. You can look at the Greek and you say, oh, this Greek is so terrible. They mismatched the case and everything. But that's because the underlying Hebrew must have been this. And it works perfectly if we just literally translate that back into to Hebrew, and we can see that this is the reason that the Greek read this way. But then when I look at the Cochin text, it has something else entirely. Okay.
Now, I want to get that book myself. What is the name of that particular book? And from there, where can they get the other books as well? You've written many, I think, at this point.
I have 20 books, 19 to 20 books, I think, available on Amazon right now, and more coming, because I've written 40 books over my lifetime, and some of those are out of print, and I'm going to be revising them and getting them back up on Amazon in the future. Plus, I have other books in me that I'm working on. In fact, I have 2 books on my hard drive right now that are almost complete and ready to go.
Amazing.
So you can search me, James Scott Trimm, on Amazon, and find some of my books. I've got the Gospel according to the Hebrews. I did a complete reconstruction of the Hebrew text behind it, and put it back together again from all the fragments that we have. A complete reconstruction. And so I've done the Gospel according to the Hebrews. I've done Unveiling the Hebrew and Aramaic Origins of the New Testament. I've done a book called Returning to the Way, Restoring Nazarene Judaism, the original Jewish believers of Yeshua as the Messiah. I've written Satan and Demons, The Untold Story. I've written several, like I said, nearly 20 books. I've written a complete commentary to the Book of Enoch that is over 600 pages. I've done
You've got a lot of books.
Study edition of the Book of Enoch and a study edition of the Book of Jasher.
Now, you also got a book on one of my favorite subjects, demons. Is that right?
Yeah, Demons, Satan and Demons, The Untold Story.
I'm going to ask you a question about that later. Folks, we're live with James Trimm. Let's see. There's certainly some things I want to ask you about in this program, so I'm writing myself some notes. Okay, let me dive into this question with you. Okay, as I understand, when we're talking about the Tanakh, the Old Testament, when you come across a capital L-O-R-D in the King James, that's a placeholder for the name of God. And I go with Yahovah. I know some you'll go with Yahweh or Yahuwah, but that's pretty easy to tell in the Old Testament when it's talking about the Father. And I understand that there's 49 locations, of course, that would be the shortened version Yah. But when we get to the New Testament, a completely different matter. This term we hear about called Kyrios. What does Kyrios mean to begin with?
Lord. Master.
Okay. And that would be just capital L, then lowercase O-R-D. You know, the same title, meaning my master, that you might give a British, landowner, my lord. So how do we distinguish in the New Testament that we get up from our Greek and the King James between master and the actual name of God the Father? The capital L-O-R-D, because they don't distinguish for the most part between that, right, in Greek?
Yeah, so you can use context. I know there's been some different theories around about whether there's a definite article or not, but in the Aramaic and in the Hebrew, it's not a problem. In the Hebrew Matthew and the Hebrew Mark and Luke that we have, and the Hebrew Hebrews, we have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spelled out. Or, well, I say we have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spelled out. Are like 3 Yuds with a core around it, or just a Hey by short for Hashem, indicating that the name went there. So we can tell where Yahweh goes versus where it would have been Adonai. Okay, with the
Adonai
Aramaic,
meaning Lord, Greek Kyrios meaning Lord. So Adonai equals Kyrios between the two languages.
Yes, Adon or
Okay.
Adonai, and
Okay.
in the Aramaic, the word Maryah appears. So there's a Peshitta Bible. Okay, the Peshitta isn't just the New Testament. There's a Peshitta Old Testament too, and the Peshitta Old Testament is a literal Syriac Aramaic translation from the Hebrew. You can tell by looking that the text was translated directly from the Hebrew.
When we say Syriac, does that tie into the nation of Syria and a region over in that area?
Yes. So we say Syriac for for 2 reasons. One, the Romans called Aramaic Syriacos, the language of the Syrians. So in Latin and Old Latin documents, see Aramaic called Syriacos. And in old Greek documents, we'll see that. Okay. Um, just like they called Hebrew Hebraicos. Okay. Um, when we, in modern scholarship, we use the term Syriac to describe a certain dialect of Aramaic that was originated from a place called Edessa in Syria, and it's the Aramaic dialect in which the Old Syriac and the Peshitta Aramaic texts are written. And so, in the Peshitta, wherever the word Adon or Adonai occurs, we see Mar or Maron. Okay, but wherever the sacred name appears, Yud He Vav He, we see Maria. Now, Maria, contrary to what goes around some circles on the internet, is not Mar Yah. It's simply the emphatic form of Mar. So, but the emphatic form Maria is used wherever the sacred name appears. So, if we go then to the New Testament part of the Peshitta, we can use the same logic and deduce that Mar or Maron means Lord or our Lord, and Maria means the sacred, indicates where the sacred name goes. So we have a key in Hebrew and Aramaic as to which of those, where it's talking about the Lord Yahweh and when it's talking about Lord Adonai.
Okay, that's very informative. And I'm just going to throw this in there because this has been on my radar too. All this controversy over Palestine. And, there was no historical Palestine until the Roman Emperor Hadrian decided to blot out the name Judea, and he changed it to Syria Palestina around 135 AD. So people say, well, the Palestinian people, they weren't an ancient people. There was never a Palestinian king. That name did not exist. It was Judea. And it was the Roman emperor, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, that came in there and erased the name of Judea, and they gave it Syriac Palestine. Okay, it's always belonged to the Jews. And by the way, God gave Gaza to the tribe of the Jews, Judah, over there in Joshua 15:47. America, United Nations, nobody has a right to go over there and divide the land of Israel. By the way, I am a Zionist, Brother Trimm. I believe
as am I.
The Jews' right to every square inch of land that God gave them. And what God gives, let no man take away. Don't mess with Israel's land. Don't divide it up, President Trump, and cut it into portions. We have no right to do that. And, I don't care what the Bible maps say. They've even infiltrated our Bibles and put Palestine on there. I'm going to rip them out. We need to go back to what God called the land and what it was prior to the Roman invasion. And, it was just like Constantine and the Catholic Church. They came in there and they changed the Sabbath from Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown to Sunday. And we got people worshiping on Sunday because of the Roman Catholics who hijacked the Sabbath. What do you say to that?
There has never been a country called Palestine.
Right?
You can't name the great poets of Palestine, of ancient Palestine. You can't tell me who the last king of Palestine was or who the first king of Palestine was. You can't tell me, the great Palestinian works of literature over the last 500 years. They don't exist. In fact, and a lot of people don't know this, the Jerusalem Post, which has always been a Jewish newspaper, okay, before it was called the Jerusalem Post, it was originally called the Palestinian Post, because in the 19th century and even in the early 20th century, Jews that lived in Israel were called Palestinians, and Arabs that lived there were called Arabs. And
Right.
it wasn't until the mid 20th century that Arabs decided to create out of whole cloth a Palestinian people that that supposedly needed a homeland because it wasn't going to resonate to say that we needed an Arab nation. There are 22 Arab nations already.
That's right.
So nobody needs to create an Arab homeland for the poor Arabs that don't have a homeland. They've got more nations than probably any other ethnicity already.
Not to mention, Jordan declared that they were the land of the Palestinians. Why do you need two Palestinian countries then?
Jordan
go to Jordan.
Jordan occupies most of what was British Palestine, and the majority population of Jordan identifies Palestinians. Therefore, we already have a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan.
Absolutely. But if we want to go even further back, that land of Jordan actually belongs to Israel, doesn't it?
Yes, and by the way,
As
nobody
does
is
Lebanon.
nobody is asking the country of Jordan to give up land to create a Palestinian state.
Right?
Nobody was asking any of the Ottoman Empire or any of the Arab nations that have had control to create a Palestinian state there. But now that Jewish people have returned to their land, suddenly they're supposed to create a Palestinian state there.
Well, there's some good news. Israel's going to eventually get back all the land that God gave them, which includes, I think, most of Jordan, and includes swaths of land that they don't have possession of now, but they're going to get it one day. And I want to be there to see it. Let me move on to a couple other subjects here. Okay, here's something I'm running down the rabbit trail on right now. I assumed, and I don't know if I'm correct or not, that what we have today for the Old Testament written in Hebrew, like the Leningrad Codex or the Aleppo Codex, is the original Hebrew. Some, though, are running with a narrative that the Masoretes came in and they changed some of the Hebrew. And if that's true, that presents a problem for me because there's a guy right now on a YouTube channel, and he showed some examples where he said the Masoretes changed it and they indicated when they had changed it. So if that's the case, what can I trust in? And it may not be a salvation issue where they made a change to a word or a vowel, but I'm looking for precision. And, the Masoretes came along and they put in punctuation marks so we would know how to spell and pronounce the word. And I think that's a good thing because I don't know how to speak Hebrew or read it. I would certainly need those cannellation marks in the Kud. But what do you have to say about this theory that the Masoretes have corrupted the Hebrew text and we may need to go back to the Paleo-Hebrew or another version? What's your thoughts on the Masoretes?
Okay, so the Masoretic text only dates to the Middle Ages. So first of all, there's no crisis here because the Masoretic text didn't even exist before the Middle Ages, so we don't need to say, "Oh, well, there's something wrong with there's something wrong with the Masoretic text, we don't have a text." The Masoretes did put notes in the margins indicating that the scribes, not the Masoretes, but the scribes before them, had made certain alterations to the text.
Oh.
So there are, and I don't have the notes on it in front of me, but it's over 100. I'm thinking like 113 or 118 places where the notes in the Masorah, the marginal notes, indicate that a place where Adonai appears in the Masoretic text was originally the sacred name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Okay.
Yahweh. And that the scribes repaired, it was called Tikkun Soferim. repairs of the scribes, and that the scribes made this change to keep you from being confused. Because in these places, there appears that either Yud-He Vav-He is personified, or Yud-He Vav-He, more than one Yud-He Vav-He appears to exist, if you will. And so in these places, the Masoretes changed the text, repaired it, tikkun. Not the Masoretes themselves. The Masoretes simply made a faithful record of what was before them, but they put in notes indicating that the scribes had made changes.
How would they know there were changes made by the scribes before them?
Either by tradition, which is what Masorah means, and also maybe by different manuscripts. Now, we have evidence to support some of these, but let me finish. Another changes. I think there were 13 places where they did the same thing with Elohim, and then there were other passages. There were maybe like 13 passages that were indelicate that they reworded because they objected to the wording of the text. They thought it was not well worded. Okay. But the Masoretic text isn't the only witness that we have to the text of the Tanakh. We have the Peshitta Aramaic text of the Tanakh, which is a literal Aramaic translation that was made in ancient times. We have the Septuagint, which was a Greek translation that was made in ancient times. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date to the Second Temple era, most of them well before the first century. We have the Samaritan Pentateuch, which the Samaritans made certain changes, but the majority of it reads the same as our Torah. So we have, and we have the Targums, which are paraphrases.
Now you're saying just as it relates to the Torah, but what about the rest of the prophets?
Tanakh.
Oh, the whole Tanakh, okay.
The whole Tanakh.
Okay.
Now, in the case of the Samaritan Pentateuch, it's only the Torah, but and in the case of the Septuagint, it was originally only the Torah, but we know that by the time of by 150 CE, I believe, at least, it included the entire Tanakh. So we have other ancient witnesses. We also have something called the Cairo Geniza. The Cairo Geniza was, so what a Geniza was that when a sacred text that had the sacred name in it would get worn out, the question is what to do with it.
Oh,
you don't want to destroy it. It's got the name in it. But on the other hand, it's all worn out. You don't want to use it because it's defective. There may be holes and missing text or whatever. So they would take in the synagogue, they would have a room in which they would put these old worn out scrolls and put them in this room called a Geniza. Geniza means treasury. So they would put them in this room, and if the room became filled up, they would wall it up and start up another room. So they would put in a wall where you just wall it off and start another room like that.
That's
cool. In the 19th century, we found an old synagogue in Cairo, in the city of Cairo in Egypt, that had this huge Geniza. And so it was loaded with thousands of scrolls.
Do you think that is a standard for synagogues? They'll have a Geniza in all of them?
Not now, but in ancient times.
Are there any ancient synagogues still standing where there may be a Geniza we have not uncovered yet?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. But the Cairo Geniza find was huge. Excuse me.
That's amazing.
And so we have manuscripts that come from the Cairo Geniza. So we can look at some of these places where the Masorah The Masoretes say that the scribes changed Yahweh to Adonai, and we can look them up in these other versions. And in fact, I did a translation called the Hebraic Roots version several years ago, and in each one of those I put a footnote, and the footnote indicates where are the other sources. Like, well, the Masorah says that it originally had Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh here, Yahweh, and sure enough, the copy we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls has Yahweh there. The Peshitta has Mar Yah there, etc.
That's amazing. Okay, so there's many other sources there. Now, I think, as I understand it, modern Judaism wanted to standardize a Hebrew Bible, and they've taken the Masoretes text, the Aleppo Codex, and I think the Leningrad Codex, and that's become like the gold standard. And in Israel, they have one called the, is it called the Jerusalem Codex?
So, counterintuitively, the Masoretic text was not the product of Rabbinic Judaism. The Masoretic text, at least one of the Masoretic families, appear to have been Karaites.
Oh yeah, they hold only to the Tanakh, not the Talmud, correct?
Right. They don't believe in oral law.
And when I said Jerusalem Codex, I meant to say the Jerusalem Crown, just to correct myself. Continue on with the story.
So the Karaites seem to have been actually the originators of the Masoretic text, but it became adopted by Rabbinic Judaism and is the standard text in Rabbinic Judaism today. And it's a very faithful text by and large.
And what is that based on? The Aleppo and Leningrad codexes?
Yes. And we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, a couple of copies of Isaiah that are almost identical to the Masoretic text of Isaiah. On the other hand, we also found manuscripts of Samuel, 1 Samuel, that differed from the Masoretic text. And it was actually Frank Cross was working on these manuscripts of Samuel and 1 Samuel, but back in the day it was only Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel were one book. But he's looking at this Hebrew manuscript, and it keeps differing from the Masoretic text that he's comparing it to. And then he suddenly realized he remembered some of these variances, and he pulled out his Septuagint. And they were this Hebrew manuscript of 1 Samuel was disagreeing with the Masoretic text in agreement with the Septuagint in many places. So this opened up a whole new way of thinking, because now we know that when the Septuagint disagrees with the Masoretic text, it's not always because the Septuagint translators got it wrong in the translation process. It's sometimes because they were translating from a Hebrew text that differed from the Masoretic text. And this is why, by the way, we have the same phenomena in the New Testament. There are passages in the New Testament that some people claim are quoting the Septuagint. They're not. We would expect first century quotations from the Tanakh to sometimes agree with the Masoretic text and sometimes agree with the Septuagint, just like the Dead Sea Scrolls.
By the way, have the Dead Sea Scrolls all been analyzed and digitized yet?
Yes.
And in looking through those, did they find that the books of the Bible that they had contained additional texts that we do not have, like in a King James today, or were they the same pretty much?
No, they included many of the books that we call Apocrypha, the Apocrypha, the Wisdom of Ben Sirach, Tobit, and among them. Yes, several copies of the Book of Enoch. Seems to have been a very important book to them. It's hard to, for sure, say that they counted a certain book as canonical because, if somebody uncovered, my library in the rubble, they might think that I thought the Quran and the Book of Mormon were, You see what I'm saying? Because I have a
Sure.
vast library. But uh, uh, there were certainly multiple copies of the Book of Enoch at Qumran. And in fact, my translation of the Book of Enoch, which I published as a study edition, follows the Aramaic copies that were found at Qumran wherever possible, as opposed to the Ethiopic or Greek.
Let me jump on that for a second. As I understand it, there are 3 versions of Enoch. There's like Enoch 1, 2, and 3, and people I've heard that have read those, they said stick with the first one, the second, the third one.
So not 3 versions of Enoch. They're first, second, and third Enoch.
Okay.
Okay. So first Enoch is the one that's quoted in the Bible and the one that was found at Qumran.
Okay.
Okay. Second Enoch is less authoritative than that. But it does have some parallels with some quotations or references to things that Enoch supposedly said that are cited in the church fathers that don't appear in First Enoch. So it's a little bit iffy. Third Enoch has nothing to do with either of those 2 books, and it's an apocalypse of Ishmael the high priest that supposedly ascended to heaven and communicated with Enoch in heaven.
Well, that one's going in the garbage.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the other. It has nothing to do with First and Second Enoch.
Speaking of Ethiopia, there is a group on YouTube right now. They're advertising the Ethiopian Bible. Have you looked into this Ethiopian Bible? They say it's the Bible to get. At least that's their pitch.
Well, so the Ethiopian canon is substantially larger, includes First Enoch and Jubilees, than that's the canon of the Ethiopic Orthodox Church. However, the Ethiopic translations I don't think are that great. So, and I don't think the Book of Jubilees should be canon myself.
Okay.
It contradicts the Torah.
I'll sidestep that then.
Yeah. But I do have no problem with the books known as the Apocrypha, including Third and Fourth Maccabees, and the book of First Enoch. And I'm also have great interest in the book of Jasher.
Okay, folks.
And of course, the
gospel
according to the Hebrews. Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Now, that brings up another question. In my King James Bible, they have the book of Hebrews. Is that different than the one you're talking about?
Yes, that's completely different. So that's Paul's epistle to the Hebrews. When I say the gospel according to the Hebrews, I'm talking about a book that was quoted by the church fathers about 50 times. Also, it appears in some places that in Bible manuscripts written in the margin references to it. So the gospel according to the Hebrews was an apocryphal gospel that was used by the ancient Nazarenes and in a variant version by the ancient Ebionites, the ancient Jewish believers in Yeshua. And there's a good case to be made, which I make in my book, my Gospel According to the Hebrews book, that it is the source for our 4 Gospels. And in fact, from what the church fathers say, it appears that our book of Matthew is an abridgment of the Gospel According to the Hebrews. I gathered together all the fragments of the Gospel According to the Hebrews that appear quoted in church fathers, appear even in medieval commentaries and early medieval commentaries, and are written in the margins of certain Bible manuscripts. And I used Hebrew Matthew as a superstructure because the indication is that our Matthew is actually a abridgment of the Gospel according to the Hebrews. And I put all these pieces back together again where they would belong in the in Matthew, and where they agree only with Luke, I would take the whole story where that fragment appears from Luke and put it in Matthew where it would belong, etc. And I put the Gospel according to the Hebrews back together again, and I did this in biblical Hebrew and in English on parallel pages. So it's actually in Hebrew and English reconstructed in its entirety.
Now, as you're reconstructing that,
I worked on
40
40 years on that.
have you released that book yet?
Yes, it is available on Amazon right now.
Oh, it's amazing. We're live with James Trimm. Okay, let me go back to my list here. I'm jumping around, but I need the answers. Yes.
I've also written fiction. I wrote a fiction book called Demons Don't Keep Sabbath, which is about an Orthodox rabbi who is a demon hunter. And it's intended to be the first in a series. I need to get back to writing some more books in the series. It's kind of a fun, interesting book, and my pitch for it is that the story is fiction, but the demonology is real. And then I've also written books on theoretical physics and Stoicism. So I've written a lot of books on different subjects as well as theology.
If I was interested,
science.
If I was interested in exploring exorcism and demonology as it was done in the Old Testament, are there any historical accounts of it or any books where I can learn more about that? I know about the deliverances that came in the New before
so
that.
I would say there's probably some information on that in my book, Satan and Demons, The Untold Story, but there is an exorcism that's found in the formula that's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's a good deal of information on the subject found in the Talmud and in the Zohar. Maybe I should write a book about that.
That would be interesting for those of us that are interested in deliverance. Okay, going back to my notes here. So they've got a thing called the Jerusalem crown. And apparently that's the gold standard now in Israel as of the 80s. It's this very large bound Bible. And I think the subtext was the Aleppo or the Leningrad Codex. So here's my question to you. I grew up with the King James because I speak English. I've got the translation of the King James from the Hebrew and the Greek, the King James translators. But I realize there are some problems with it, causes confusion in my mind, and I've set out to go down into the underlying text. I'm working on the Old Testament right now, so I want to get into the Hebrew. And I'll get up on like Bible Hub and look at the Hebrew interlinear. And I think the base text for that is the Masoretic text, the Leningrad or the Aleppo Codex. If I do that, can I get more precision if I want to know what the Hebrew said versus the King James translation? Or do I need to go further back into something called the Paleo? People keep talking about the Paleo. What is that?
Okay, so Paleo Hebrew is a script. That's all it is. That's all Paleo Hebrew is.
Like a font?
It's a style, like a font. It's a style of script.
Oh, okay.
And anciently, Hebrew looked different from modern Hebrew. They were pictographs of items that got written and rewritten more and more sloppy over thousands of years until the script that we use today is called Katav Asherim in Hebrew, the writing of the Assyrians. It's also called block script, and it's also called Ezra script because we came back from the Babylonian captivity using the same script that the Babylonians were using, or the Assyrians had been using. And that script still is the same 22 letters and descends from Paleo Hebrew, but written, more and more sloppy over the years until the letters looked very different. But the Aleph was originally the Aleph was originally,
right?
Right. The Aleph was originally a pictograph of an ox. For example, uh, bait was a pictograph of a house, and so on.
Wow.
Uh, Gimel was a pictograph of a camel. Um, Now, I know, it's interesting to look at Hebrew words and see how they might have originated from some of these pictographs. Um, but it's at the end of the day, it needs to be well, gee whiz, that's cool. you know, uh, it's not necessarily doctrine. And it has evolved with some people to where they present it or think that Paleo Hebrew is a language, which it's not. It's a script. Uh, when people start to talk what something means in Paleo Hebrew, I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's like talking about what something means in cursive. Instead, you know.
Well, I
Uh,
didn't know if, for example, there may be uh, Hebrew books of the Old Testament in Paleo that might be different from the Masoretic Hebrew.
Well, they might be different from the Masoretic Hebrew in the sense that we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls a handful of books that are written in that Paleo Hebrew. So they're pre-Masoretic copies. They're not the Masoretic text, but it
Have they
has
been
nothing to do
compared?
with. But we also have many that are written in Ketav Ashrim or in Ezra's script, and
Okay.
and they also may differ from the Masoretic text. So it has nothing to do with them being Paleo Hebrew.
So there's some that just seem to be straight Paleo Hebrew, and that's it.
A
I
handful.
was scratching my head on that.
A
Okay.
very small number, and there are some that also have the sacred name written in them in Paleo Hebrew,
Okay.
while the rest is in the script of the day, Ketav Asherim.
So let's say you found a book in Paleo Hebrew and one in the Masoretic Hebrew. If you compared the two, would it basically be the same
So the differences have
translation?
nothing to do with it being Paleo Hebrew. As I said, the Masoretic text didn't exist until the Middle Ages. So you don't have any Masoretic text copies written in Paleo Hebrew unless somebody just in modern times decided to create one. Okay. You have in the Dead Sea Scrolls some pre-Masoretic Hebrew. All the Dead Sea Scrolls are pre-Masoretic because the Masoretic text didn't exist yet. Some of those are written in standard Hebrew script, if you will, in Ketav Ashrim, and some of them, a very small handful, are written in Paleo Hebrew.
Okay, so I guess I
And
need to
all of
insert
them are
this
going
question.
to whether they. So imagine I said that you have a copy of Moby Dick that was a standardized text in the 20th century in a printed edition, and there was some ancient somehow copies of Moby Dick that were found in these scrolls, and some of those were printed and some of them were cursive, and they all differed from that later text in that they didn't agree with it exactly because they were centuries earlier, but it had nothing to do with which script they were written in. So when you start talking about Paleo Hebrew in that context, you can, but it has nothing to do with whether it agreed or disagreed. You also have non-Paleo Hebrew manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls that are pre-Masoretic and don't agree with the Masoretic text exactly.
So the question would be, which is the more accurate version? The older version that could have been in Paleo?
So what you have to
I
do
guess it.
is, I have an answer for you now. So there's an area of study called textual criticism. And it is how we arrive at a best text. And it involves weighing several factors. The age of the manuscript is one of them, but it's not everything, because you can have a very late manuscript that was copied from a very early one, and you can have a very early manuscript that's filled with errors. So the age of manuscript is one of the factors. So we're looking at all these different manuscripts. They don't necessarily all agree exactly. So maybe we have 2 or 3 possible readings for a different passage or for a different word. And one of the things we look at is how old are the manuscripts. That's one of the things we look at. The geographic distribution of the manuscripts. We also look at the integrity of the manuscript overall in all the other passages. We look at see if there's a demonstrable scribal error where it looks like a resh got miscopied as a dalet or something like that. And one of the rules, ironically, is that the reading that is most difficult is more likely to be correct, because a scribe is more likely to try and clarify something than he is to muddle it up intentionally. So there's all kinds of different factors that we look at to try and determine which reading is original. It's not just a matter of saying, the Masoretic text is it, or the Septuagint is it. We have to look at all of it cumulatively and weigh the evidence. Now, by and large, the Masoretic text, I believe, is right 95, 99% of the time.
Okay.
There are a handful of passages where I think, well, there's a perfect example. There's a messianic prophecy in Psalm 22 where it says, it says in the Hebrew of the Masoretic text, like a lion, my hands and my feet. Like a lion is ka'ari in Hebrew. Ka'ari, my hands and my feet. Like a lion. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like a lion, my hands and my feet, So additional words get added in to try and make it make sense. Like lion, they are at my hands and my feet. But the copies that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and a couple of copies that were found in the Cairo Geniza don't say ka'ari, they say ka'aru. Now ka'ar means they have pierced, and the u endings means they. So ka'aru means they have pierced my hands and my feet. The Septuagint translates it, they have pierced my hands and my feet. The Peshitta translates it, they have pierced my hands and my feet. And of course, they have pierced my hands and my feet has great prophetic meaning in reference to Yeshua. But the Masoretic text says, like a lion, my hands and my feet. This is a case where I think the Masoretic text gets it wrong. All the other witnesses seem to weigh in the other direction.
So not a salvation doctrine, but again, there are some things that clearly could be updated for more precision in the transmittal.
One of the psalms, there are things called acrostic psalms. Oh. And an acrostic psalm is a psalm where each verse of the psalm starts with the next Hebrew letter. So the first verse will start with Aleph. The second verse will start with Beit. We have one of these acrostic psalms where the noon in the Masoretic text, the line for noon is missing. So it goes, it skips the in line, if you will. Well, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found the psalm with the noon line in it, and it agrees with the Septuagint there.
Oh, so that's good.
That's another case where the Masoretic text got it wrong. But the Masoretic text is really good. In fact, like I said, we found 2 Isaiah scrolls in Cave 1 at Qumran that are almost identical to the Masoretic text, word for word.
Oh, that's good then. It restores my confidence in it. Let everything be established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Folks, we're live with James Trimm. But we've got a controversy. Hort and Westcott come on the scene, and they set out to create a new Greek New Testament, critical text. And I understand that they went with the minority text, of which there's only about 27 manuscripts, versus the 5,000 or 6,000 majority texts that were used, like with the King James, for example. And many embraced this Hort and Westcott critical text, and it's the basis for many of the translations today. And
So
I
most
understand there's like
translations today are based on the UBS text or the Nestle Allen text, which
right.
I actually have the Nestle Allen text right in front of me. Um, the
That
the
that
the
came
Westcott
after
Hort text was
Horton
quite a
Westcott.
while ago. Yeah,
Right.
that's more recent than. So the Nestle Allen text is one of the standards in the United Bible Society UBS text. Now, what that's all about is when we look at all the thousands of Greek New Testament manuscripts, and there are thousands of them. Okay, the vast majority, well, they fall into three categories when we look at them. When we look at the readings of them, their readings fall into three, what we call text types. One of these text types is the Alexandrian text type. Another one of them is the Western text type. And the third one is the Byzantine text type. When we look at the age of the manuscripts, only a handful are ancient. So there are thousands of Greek manuscripts, but almost all of them come from the Middle Ages. Only a handful of them are ancient. Sorry, my headset fell off my head.
It's okay.
Are you there?
Oh yeah,
So-
you can tighten it at points. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. So
Okay, good. Want to make sure. Go ahead.
So these manuscripts, there's thousands, and I think there's like 5,000 now.
Right.
But like I said, they're almost all from the Middle Ages. A handful of them are truly ancient. Most of the ancient ones are of the Alexandrian type. Some of the ancient ones are of the Western type. And all of those late manuscripts that I talked about, almost all of those are the Byzantine type. So when Erasmus compiled the Textus Receptus, he didn't have access to a lot of ancient manuscripts. He had access to a bunch of medieval manuscripts. And so his text was based on late manuscripts. And in fact, he couldn't even find a complete Greek text for Revelation at the time. So he actually back translated the Latin Vulgate into Greek to create Greek passages for parts of his Revelation. And there was also a passage that he didn't include in his first edition. And the bishops came to him and said, "Why didn't you include this verse?" And he said, "Well, it wasn't in my manuscripts. If you can show me a manuscript in Greek that has it, because it was in Latin, but it wasn't in the Greek." He says, "You can show me a Greek manuscript, I'll include it." So they brought him a Greek manuscript and he included it. And we now know from the dating of that Greek manuscript that they brought him that they went and created one.
So it had to go from Latin to Greek to English. No wonder we got some issues.
Okay,
How
so
about the Hebrew?
So the reason that that you have this controversy today is you have the KJV only people and people that are used to what they have, and the King James Version was a translation of the Textus Receptus. So it was a translation made of these late manuscripts. Now, there are also people, that it's also called the majority text, okay, that think that all the manuscripts should just vote, and it should be that simple. And whatever's in the majority of manuscripts we should follow. Well, that's great, except the majority of manuscripts just tells you who had the best photocopier. It doesn't tell you which reading is most original. So we have to weigh a lot of different things, like which manuscript is older. If we weigh only which manuscript is older, then we end up with these Alexandrian manuscripts and the Western type text.
And you could end up with a text that is beautifully preserved because it had been set aside had errors in it. Nobody used it again.
You-
So, I mean,
So,
in other words, if you're going to use something frequently, it's going to wear out and you're going to have to make new copies, right?
yes. So the Westcott Hort text and the Nestle Allen text and the UBS text favor readings from these Alexandrian type texts, which are the oldest manuscripts. Now, I think they're both wrong. Let me explain what I mean. My research has shown, and this is laid out in my book, Unveiling the Hebrew and Aramaic Origins of the New Testament, that the Greek Western type text is the oldest type of Greek text. It has more Semitisms in it than the other types, and it has unique agreement with the Old Syriac and with the Latin, the Old Latin, and the oldest quotations in the church fathers, etc. So I think it's the most original. I think that the Alexandrian text was the result of an effort in Alexandria to smooth out the clumsy Greek of the Western text type that followed the Semitic grammar too closely and create a nice, smooth Greek reading version. And then that resulted in readings that differed between that and the Western type text, and the Byzantine type text ended up as a result of reconciling the two alternate texts into getting alternate readings. So you end up with some of the, and also scribes later trying to clarify the text and clear confusion by sometimes even writing something in the margin, but then somebody else comes along and didn't realize it was intended to be in the margin and putting it in the main text. So that's how you end up with the difference. And I see some of these things on the internet, comparing a modern translation like the NIV with the KJV and saying that they took out passages in the NIV. They didn't take any passages out. The passages that aren't in the NIV weren't in the text they were translating from. And in fact, since those were the oldest manuscripts and the KJV was translated from newer manuscripts, it's much more likely that those passages got added rather than subtracted, added into the text behind the KJV rather than subtracted from the text found in the NIV.
Now, I like the KJV for one reason, and that is it contains pronouns that a lot of the modern versions after that do not have. And I never understood the thee, thy, thou, and the ye, and people would throw the King James under the bus. But when you realize ye is plural and thee, thy, thou is singular, and you need to be able to properly transmit from the Hebrew into the English, you're going to need some pronouns. Otherwise, how do you know who it's talking about? Is it a single person or is it a group? And so now that I know how to decode those pronouns, I'm thankful for them. And when the King James was written in 1611, that's not how they talked. They actually revived those pronouns so they could properly transmit from the old languages into the English in a situation where I think Hebrew and Greek also have singular and plural.
Are you sure about that? Because Shakespeare wrote his plays in 1620, and it looks like the same English to me.
Well, when you're talking about singular or plural, how are you going to say it?
No. I'm not disagreeing with that. You said that they revived that in 1611 for the for that hermeneutic purpose.
That's the way.
And I'm saying that Shakespearean plays in the 1620s use that nomenclature.
Someone had did a talk, and they said they had pulled these pronouns that were not, used on the street back into use. But irregardless of whether they were correct or not, what I heard, the fact remains that you need to be able to distinguish between singular and plural, male and female, and you have that in Hebrew and Greek, but you don't have that in English, right?
Right. As a matter of fact, we have a problem with you. We don't have a plural, singular, and plural you in English.
Unless you're from Georgia, where you say y'all.
Well, Texas, y'all, where we say y'all, or up in the
Ewans?
Northeast, where they add U's. They put an S on the end.
Ewans,
Use guys.
But I mean, that's exactly right. Now, if you want
And
to
there
have
are
an
some
accurate
passages. There are some passages where it changes the meaning, or it impacts the meaning of the text.
sure.
And so that's true. But
If
The King James version also has a number of errors. Translates the word pastor as Easter in one place. Pascal instead of Passover, it's Easter.
agreed,
Uh, and it
agreed.
includes a lot of these late readings that don't appear in the earliest manuscripts.
So if Jesus said, "Ye must be born again," when you see "ye," that's plural. If he said, "You must be born again," is he just saying that one individual or all? He's talking to all. So, I mean, having those pronouns that you get in the King James and don't get in the others makes a big difference to me. And if that was the only difference, I would stick with it just for that. But clearly, the King James needs an update. And that leads me into, I want to show you something special that I'm working on. Let me see if I can share the screen to you. Okay, watch this. Brother James, you need a bathroom break, by the way?
I'm
How
fine.
you doing?
Of course, we
Okay.
only have, if we're going 2 hours, we only have 15 more minutes. But I can go longer than that if you need to.
Okay. Let me show you something on the screen. Let me get this off the
Okay.
screen here. Hold on a second. Okay, let's see if this comes up. Okay. Tell me if you can see this. Now, what I did is I took the Cambridge 1769 edition of the KJV. I downloaded it into Microsoft Word. And what I want to do is I'm coming up with my own version, translation. It's going to be called the Yahovah Bible. Now, I'm doing this for myself and my children. And there's been some others that have made attempts on it, have, went so far with it. I wanted to go in and where they use the placeholder, the Lord, I wanted to restore the name of the Father. I'm running with Yahovah. I know there's Yahweh, there's Yahuwah, there's several different people use. So what I'm doing is I want to go through ultimately and search for every place where it has the Lord. As you see right here, I'm over in Samuel chapter 1. And I'm going to take it ultimately, and I'm going to go in and manually update it. Now, I was telling Nehemiah Gordon this, and he said, "But did you know about the 49 locations where it's a shortened version?" Yeah. And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yeah, you got to go on and it's not going to be Yahovah in those 49 locations. It's going to be Yah." I said, "Okay, thank you for the heads up." So,
Well, there's also 118 locations where the
taking notes.
Masoretes,
Tell me.
Well, there's 109. I think it's 118, 119. I can find the list somewhere where the Masorah indicates that the original word there was Yahweh, but the Masoretic text has Adonai. So your KJV is going to have Lord normally spelled out where it should have been Lord in all caps.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to take note of that. So I was ultimately going to go through with one pass and restore the name of Yahovah. Okay, it makes no sense to me why King James would put Jehovah in there 3 or 4 locations and then go back to capital L-O-R-D. I have no idea why they did that. But, I know that God is not the author of confusion. And my opinion is God is the title for 3, the Father, the Son, the Ruach HaKodesh. And there's some that believe Jesus only, God only, but that's not the topic of this discussion today. But I wanted to go in and put in the name of the Father. But then I noticed that the King James translators, when they went from Hebrew to English and then Greek to English, there are differences in the names of the same people. Noah, Noe. Elijah, Elias. And I'm scratching my head. Who are some of these people that I'm reading the New Testament? Different spelling than the Old. I find out it's the same person. So,
Right.
That's a problem. I think we need to standardize the spelling of the names. But let me show you the example of what I wanted to bring this up for. Okay, I'm in 1 Samuel. By the way, his name was Shmuel, wasn't it? Just like Solomon was Shlomo in Hebrew, I heard, which is interesting. I thought maybe I should go in and rename, or at least add, as you see what I've done up here, I've got the book of Samuel, Shmuel, and I found out that in the King James Bible you got 1 and 2 Samuel, but in the original Hebrew It's one book. Same
Correct.
with Kings. First and Second Kings, in the English translations, they broke it into two parts, but in the original it was just one book, Kings. The Nevi'im, here we're on the prophets. So, okay, I want to ask you a question. I need some advice here. 1 Samuel, or Samuel chapter 1, verse 11. And this is kind of interesting because just so happens this is talking about the Nazarite vow. I want to ask you, what does it mean to be a Nazarite? But look down here. It says, and she vowed a vow and said, O Jehovah of hosts, if thou will indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto Jehovah all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. Well, one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the name of God back in there, the Father. But when you come down to razor, in modern English, we don't spell razor R-A-S-O-R, do we?
Nope.
No, it's R-A-Z-O-R. And by the way, I just switched over here to the Hebrew interlinear, and I will give him to Tetragrammaton all the days of his life, and a razor not shall go up on his head. Okay, so I'm coming through here. I might as well fix a spelling here. It's not a salvation doctrine, but clearly I would spell it R-A-Z-O-R. So if I'm going to make that change, and I want to be able to go back in the future and realize where I made a change, what would you do in a case like this? Would you put a little subscript here and have another page where it just lists all the changes you've made? Would you skip a line like underneath this thing and have a little area for notes? Maybe do it at the bottom of your page. What would you
the Bible's
personally
going to
do?
be long. The Bible's going to be long enough without doing that. I really can't advise you because I'm not sure what
In other words, where you're working on a text, and let's say you see something that's a mistake, you want to correct it, and you wanted to make an annotation to it.
you always have
Where would you have a footnote is what I'm saying. That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
But you see how
That's
I've got this in one column right here?
Yeah.
And some Bibles have it in two columns,
Right.
and you got to choose the font size. I mean, you can have a very thick book very quick. And the other thing is, as I'm getting older, I like to have large print. So I was thinking, I want to format this thing and print it out, and I want to be able to read it in a large print. So you've done all these books. Do you like to do them in large print, for example?
Yes. First of all, when I say large print, I mean you're not going to be able to put out a Bible in 14-point Times Roman. But
That'd be huge.
yeah. So a 12.5 Times Roman, I think, would be kind of a standard, and then your footnote would probably be in 10-point.
Do you use the same font for all the books that you do?
Yeah, well, typically I use Times Roman. I'm an old dog.
Times Roman and what font size? I mean, I bought some books and they were so small I couldn't even read them. I said, "What the hell's going on here?"
I try and do at least a 12-point font.
Okay.
And 14-point font is a nice friendly size, a nice big friendly size, but I'm not trying to pad a book. I don't want people to feel like they bought a book and it was 70. It wasn't. I didn't have enough material for books, so I put it in a big font.
Okay. Now let me flip over here, and I'm looking at an interlinear. I've always thought it would be cool to have both a Hebrew and an English. Of course, I know you got to read Hebrew right to left. And so I'm looking at Bible Hub right now. And my question to you is, if you wanted to incorporate some Hebrew alongside English, is there a public domain Hebrew text that people can access? What do you do? I mean, for example,
text is public domain.
Where would you get a digital copy? Sort of like I got the King James and and download it into a Word document. Does that exist?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure Sephira.com probably has the Masoretic text downloadable. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of places you could find where you could just download the Masoretic text.
So when you go
and
back
it's
to finding these Hebrew documents of the Gospels, for example, Matthew, I mean, you could take a photocopy of it and insert it in a page, but are you going to manually type the Hebrew to reproduce it? And then you're going to put the English side by side? How does that work?
if I do interlinear, yeah, I'm going to have to manually type it in.
And so you'll have a special Hebrew font, and will it have the accent pointers, the nakud, and what do you call those? The cannellation marks?
So possibly, first of all, the manuscript, none of the ancient manuscripts have those. So some of the manuscripts I deal with might, because they come from the 1500s. But I don't know if you've dealt with typing with the Hebrew keyboard.
No, sir, I haven't.
But typing in all those nakud with the Hebrew keyboard is a nightmare, because of the way the Hebrew keyboard lays out and works. So it would be helpful. I find it most helpful, maybe even to take some text, and there are programs out there that will add nakud, and AI will probably add nakud for uniquely points.
I don't know that I would trust AI.
but
It lies sometimes.
yeah, you'd have to definitely watch it, check it, and make sure it did it right. But it would still take less time to watch it and make sure it did it right, review its work, than it would be to try and type it in, because it is so. Basically, you have to, in between each letter, so you type an olive, and then you'd have to hit your caps lock button and a vowel, and then go back to take that back, take it back to normal, without the caps lock, and hit the next letter, and then do the caps lock and do the vowel again. Literally, it's so ridiculous.
That's difficult.
It's so time consuming that even if you are proficient, it's time consuming. Extremely.
So switching
time-consuming.
gears, as you're doing research and you want to go back to the Hebrew text, what is your go-to Hebrew Bible that you use?
The BHS.
And is there a particular publication date on that? Is that the most current one that they have, or an older version? I understand sometimes they can change some of these translations.
Yeah, well, the Masoretic text doesn't. I don't think there's a lot of major changes to the BHS over the years. The BHS that I have is the same BHS that I've probably used for 30 years.
So if you want to translate into English, will you translate yourself from the Hebrew, or will you go to like a King James or another version to see what they put in there?
Well, it depends on what purpose I'm engaged in.
So let's just say today you want to read the Bible. What would be your go-to? Will you read in Hebrew, or will you go pick up an English translation?
Oh, well, it depends on how deep I want to deal. But, if I want to read it in Hebrew, I'll definitely pull out my BHS. But oftentimes I have two big tables in my study. And one of them is a big table, used to be our dining room table. That's how big it is. Big wooden table that I have in my study just to spread out manuscripts and text. So I can have the Septuagint open, the Peshitta open, the BHS open, the Dead Sea Scrolls, text maybe, could be out, and I could be interconnecting all of these, and, how they all relate if I'm doing something really in depth. So if I'm just quickly looking something up, I just grab one of the many Bibles in my study up. It might even be a King James version.
Now, let's say you start a new book tomorrow. You have these books out for reference and study, and where will you begin to actually to build your book? Do you have like a laptop and use Microsoft Word? Do you do it on paper?
Microsoft
Typewriter? What do you
Word.
do?
Well, I mean, I have notes that I have collected over the years. Sometimes I've been, doing this for 40 years, and I have vertical files in my study of file folders with handwritten notes on them. So I may make use of some of that material. I also have articles that I have written over the last 40 years, going back to articles that I literally wrote on my Commodore 64.
Oh,
so
you're a Commodore
over the
man.
years, more of an Apple II man, but I had a Commodore 64 and an Apple II. And,
what about Atari 800?
I had one of those too, believe it or not.
Did you have the TI 99 4A?
I had one of those, and I had a TRS-80 Model 1. I was really into microcomputers as a kid.
Well, listen, I'm 56, and I'm old school. I was a computer nerd back then.
Me too.
Had a bulletin board in 1980s. I would cruise bulletin boards on my 300 baud modem in 84.
Yeah.
CompuServe, remember that?
Yes.
I wanted the Commodore 64, but I didn't have the money. I managed to get my grandfather to give me $50. I told him there was a flight simulator, and he liked to fly. And then my dad gave me $100, so I had $150, and I went up to Sears or Ward's, whatever it was, and the Commodore 64 was $199, but you could get the TI 99 4A with a $50 rebate for exactly the money I had, so I got the Texas Instruments. Worked part-time cleaning offices at age 13 after school, take all my money and buy cartridges, mailed in 12 and got the speech synthesizer, and I would play games all weekend until that TI would just freeze up from, it would overheat. So I began to trade Atari games at school and had like 100 floppy disks. And then in 1984 for Christmas, I got the Atari 800 XL. And I was full-blown nerd at that time. 300 baud. I lived to trade games, but I really wanted that Commodore 64. It always had the cool games down at Babbage's.
So I was more interested back then. I was a hacker in the 80s.
Really?
Really. In fact, I got a newspaper article. I was in the newspaper in like 1983, 84 probably. Yeah, I was in 84. When War Games came out, that was me. And I actually wrote my own modem tone scan program that would dial all of the phone numbers sequentially in a prefix looking for modems. And
So you had the acoustic modem? You just put the handset down on that?
No. I had a Hess modem for my Apple IIe, and I had so that's what I wrote the modem tone scan program for, and I wrote it in myself. That would it would call every number in a prefix and sequence, and if it got a modem, it would make a note for it. It would write to a file and make a note for me for later, and then it would keep going.
Did you come up with any underground hidden bulletin boards that way?
No, I found a lot of interesting computers, and had a lot of did a lot of hacking. I can't tell you the number of Unix systems that I got into back in the day with login root password beer.
Password beer. Now, were you a Captain Cruncher also with the whistle?
I was a phreaker later. I started out just in hacking, but once I got caught, I got traced 9 times in 2 weeks hacking into this computer system, and I learned my lesson. I was never going to get traced again, so I learned how to be a phone freak to avoid being traced.
I just pirated games.
And I cracked games. I didn't just pirate. I cracked them. Let me tell you how I cracked the Atari soft games.
Tell me.
So, it's 1981 or 82. No. Get this. using an Apple II, of course, you have to know Apple IIs. One of the software schemes that they used to protect software was they would when you booted up a disk with an Apple, with an Apple II, the first thing it stored DOS on the disk rather than in memory, so it didn't waste memory. So you would load DOS in off the disk by typing PR number 6. It would activate the number 6 slot, which was the floppy drive, and the first thing it would do is activate that, and it would load DOS into memory. But unfortunately, it would also wipe RAM in the process, which meant that if you hadn't already loaded DOS before you wrote your program, you'd lose your program. So it was very important before you wrote your program to have DOS first, then write your program, and then save it. Well, one of the protection schemes that they would use for software that Atari Soft particularly used for like Pac-Man and Centipede and whatnot was that they would they used their own DOS that divided the disk into sectors their own way, and it was their own unique DOS. So the way that worked was that if you had loaded put their disk in, it would wipe your RAM and put in their DOS. Then you could load up their program to run it, okay? But if you then tried to you couldn't save it to a regular disk because their DOS was in. So if you tried to put a regular formatted disk in there and save the program, it wouldn't be able to read the disk and save the program. So, and if you type PR number 6 again to get regular DOS in, it would wipe the program. So
you were copying, you were pirating some Atari games made for the Commodore 64, or were you on actually cracking them?
So the difference between cracking and pirating was, with cracking, the goal was to eliminate the protection and put it on a regular disk where anybody could just regular copy it after that.
Okay, I got it. And then I remember they used to also put bad sectors into the disk as well.
That was another method. So the way I overcame the Atari Soft thing was I found where DOS was stored in memory in the Apple addresses that stored DOS.
Amazing.
Now, nobody hardly used this anymore because the Apple II came with disk drives, and everybody would use a disk drive with the Apple II. But in the back of an Apple II, there was an in and out audio jack. And that was so you could theoretically save things to cassette tape. Now, nobody was doing that in the 80s, okay? But I rigged up a tape recorder, and I saved DOS to cassette tape. Regular DOS to cassette tape. It's a crazy thing to do, right?
That's
and then I loaded in an Atari Soft game like Pac-Man with their special DOS. I'd get Pac-Man in memory. Then I would load DOS manually into its memory locations from the cassette tape without wiping RAM. So now I had regular DOS, and I had the Pac-Man or whatever, and I would then be able to save Pac-Man to a regular disk. And then I went in with an editor program called ByteZap that Beagle Brothers produced. And I searched the bytes of the disk, and I found where it said copyright 1981 by Atari Soft, and I edited it to say copied right.
Oh, wow.
Copied RIGHT, all rights, WRITES, resolved instead of reserved.
Man, you were the real
Galactus.
Real deal.
Those were the days.
For that the Atari,
that was 45 years ago.
Oh, listen, man, that's what I was doing. My brother was playing football, and I'm 15 on the computer. I went crazy.
See, I didn't spend a lot of time playing video games. I was actually spending a lot of time having more fun cracking them.
I can't claim that credit. We used to get the Atari games that were cracked with someone had the Happy chip in the Atari 810 drive. And then I remember my stepfather bought an IBM PC, brought that home in '86, and then I was double time at his computer, playing games like King's Quest and back on my Atari 800 playing Ultima. But that was the beautiful days. The 5 1/4-inch floppy. Do you remember double-siding them with a hole punch?
Yes. The single to double-sided conversion kit, a hole punch.
And I remember before that, when I had the TI, I didn't have a hard drive or the expansion center that they had. I had a little cassette recorder.
Well, of course, with the TI, what they did was they sold the computer for like less than $100, and then they sold you the expansion kit for $500, and you had to have the expansion kit to hardly use any peripherals.
Other kids are playing in the yard, and I was just hoping that I could get extended basic cartridge, and then could really do some cool programming. Yeah, I saw the War Games too, and man, that gave me the fever. Do you ever have the pleasure of getting the Compute magazine and typing out those programs?
Like Byte
line
magazine?
by line?
Yeah. Byte magazine, for example.
That would drive you nuts. So many lines of code.
Oh yeah, those were the days. Those were the days. I can't tell you I hacked a Unix in Ohio and created secret accounts, and my friends and I used it as an email system. I hacked an HP 3000 in Michigan, and I wrote a program for it where everybody would be writing to the same reading and writing to the same file. So it created a chat program for us to use at night. My hacker friends and I would dial in and use it like CB Simulator on CompuServe or like IRC later. But this was years before IRC.
That's hardcore.
We had fun back in the day.
My friend had the Apple IIc. I really loved that computer. Again, I had the Atari 800 XL, and then we had the IBM PC in the home. But I had a lot of friends with Apple II, and that's what we used in school back then, were the Osborne computers, which were like a clone of the Apple. Do you remember Babbage's in Texas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went there many times. I had a friend that worked there.
Man. Oh,
but,
really?
So, little known fact, back in the day, I was the hacker known as Galactus. And I wrote a number of files on how to hack different kinds of systems that were on computer bulletin boards back then. And those files are still around.
That's
There's
amazing.
Archives of those old hacker files, and I've been able to find some of the, hacking the HP 3000 file that I wrote on how to hack an HP 3000.
Wow.
Things like those were the days. But
my call sign was Mad Max.
I was Galactus.
You were Galactus. I was Mad Max, but I didn't have any of those cool skills like you had. I was just a game collector. And I had a friend who worked there in Texas, and he would come in, and he upgraded my computer one time, put in a RAM disk, and that was kind of cool with a little toggle switch on the back. And I wish I still had that computer.
Yeah, we had a little group called the Elite Hackers Guild.
Oh, that's amazing. Where did you learn these skills at, by the way?
So some of them were intuitive, but when I was about 12 years old or so, maybe even younger, my parents sent me, I'll keep it simple. My parents started sending me to computer programming for young people classes at Tarrant County Junior College in the summers. And I started out learning on a IBM 360 370. I think it was an IBM 370. And then the following year, when they sent me back, by that time they had TRS-80 Model 1s, and they had one Wang. They had a Wang and a bunch of TRS-80 Model 1s, so I was learning on that. And then after I'd taken all the classes that they offered, after a couple of years, my parents sent me to University of Texas at Arlington to take computer programming for young people. And there I learned Fortran, and we were using punch cards on a TOPS 20 monitor on a DEC 2060 computer.
Oh, my goodness. You're really old school if you get the punch cards in there. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
as soon as I could afford to, I started buying the computers that so I bought myself a Commodore 64. Uh, I got a TI-99 4A when they discontinued the line and they were selling them off cheap. I went in and bought one.
Yes.
I When my father passed away, I got Social Security money and I bought myself a Apple IIe, and I bought a used TRS-80 Model 1 because I just wanted to have one because I originally learned on them. And then I got an Atari 800 in a garage sale later. So,
My
um,
favorite computer of all time, the Atari 800. I couldn't afford it at the time, and so I ended up getting the 800 XL a few years later. But there was a senior in high school who gave me, as a freshman, his Atari 800 for the weekend with a modem and hundreds of floppy disks, and I was just in nerd heaven. And I love the Atari. Years later, I bought them, and they're sitting in a storage unit. I found them on eBay cheap. Hey, by the way, did you know there's a guy out there on YouTube who bought the Commodore brand?
yeah,
And
yeah, I saw about that.
you see the new 64 that they brought back?
Yeah, I miss my Apple II Plus. I say 2 plus. It was really a 2 plus. When I said 2E, I'm trying to simplify it for people because I had made certain modifications to it so that it was basically a 2E. I did put in a lowercase chip with a lowercase modification, and I had an 80 column card, and so an extra memory, and I basically converted it to an Apple IIe for all practical purposes. So it was a 2 plus, but it was virtually a 2E.
You know, back then
Um,
they taught us BASIC in school, and then there was Pascal that came along. Are the kids being taught anything about programming today, or is that all been
I
done away with?
no, I suspect they're learning Python. They should be learning Python today.
Python.
Um, Python has kind of replaced BASIC, I would say, but it for kids that are in school right now, they probably don't need it because the sad case is that all that's going to be done by.
Right? So everybody was saying be a coder. And by the way, I don't like the new term coder. We always talk
Pro-
in terms of
Programming.
programmer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and
We were computer
motherboard.
programmers.
Yeah, what is a coder? Motherboard?
Yeah,
They changed
somewhere.
the main board? What the hell's going on
So,
here? I'm not a
yep,
happy
yep.
camper about that. I'm old school. I'm stuck in time. Listen, I could talk for hours with James. We just came up with something new in common. I'm going to ask you one or two more questions, and then we'll end it tonight and bring you back for part two. Um, have you run across the Lost Scroll of Moses?
No.
Okay, you mentioned the Old Hebrew that the church fathers were talking about. How do we find the Old Hebrew document? Does that exist today?
The old
Oh,
Hebrew Matthew that I was talking
yeah,
about?
I'm sorry. Yes, the Old Hebrew Matthew. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there's I tracked down a copy and photocopied every page of Munster's 1537 publication, which I have in a three-ring binder in my library. Then the Due to Late manuscript I sent off and got microfilm from the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, France, back in the 80s. And then when I got the microfilm here, and there's a long story how I got the microfilm. I mean, because I had to get a call through overseas to France and then get through the switchboard operator in French to the curator of Hebrew manuscripts. He spoke English. His name was Mr. Gavell, and he'd been educated at Oxford. And he told me how to order the microfilm, but then I had to get an international draft back in the 1980s in French francs
Oh
to
my
order it.
goodness!
Order it, and it wasn't the world we live in today. Those international drafts were mostly for people that were buying millions of dollars worth of, like a oil tanker of oil or something. So I spent like $50 for an international draft that was the equivalent of $5 in French francs. But anyway, I got it, and I got sent off, and then they airmailed it to me. I had to wait for them to make the microphone. So I had to find a specialty place in Dallas that would take this metric microfilm for me and they come out. So I got printouts of it all made out. And that's how I got the Hebrew Dutillé manuscript. And the 1551 text that I mentioned, that was one of Münster's students, I found a copy of that in an antiquities area of a library and managed to make copies of all of it and put it in a 3-ring binder. So I did a lot of this old school in the 1980s and early 90s when it was nowhere near as easy as it is to do some of this stuff now.
Well, I know that a lot of stuff has been digitized, but here's the question. Does there still exist at a university, unfound to this point, more Hebrew manuscripts of the New Testament? A friend of mine, Tom Mack, the other day said he heard through another brother that if you could get over to Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but the state of Georgia over there in Europe, there are places over there that probably have some of these manuscripts that have not been digitized yet. What do you think about that?
So one of the things, yes, this is happening all the time. Libraries and museums around the world are digitizing material that they had stored in some back room somewhere that had never been putting in their catalogs. Just like this manuscript that Garza, we're calling it the Garza Trimm manuscript, that was a manuscript of Hebrew Matthew through Luke 17, and the Matthew is largely agrees with the Dutillé Matthew, and nobody knew about it. I mean, I've been studying and keeping track, and scholars weren't aware that there was another manuscript that had the same basic, another witness to this old Hebrew version that was found in Dutillé in Münster. It had been just sitting in this library in Switzerland for 100 years without anybody hundreds of years without anybody realizing it was there, not cataloged. So now they're starting to go back and cataloging some of these things and digitizing for the purpose of digitizing, and then things are being discovered that just been sitting around in a, it's kind of like the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they took the ark and they packaged up in a crate and put it in a warehouse, and theoretically to be forgotten that it was there. This has been happening with museums and libraries for over 100 years, where they've gotten stuff into their collections and nobody's ever gotten around to sorting through it and cataloging it, and it's just been sitting in a box in a room somewhere, and somebody digitizes it and put it up, and it's like, oh, it's a Hebrew Matthew that nobody knew was around.
Now, when they digitize them, are they view only, or is there the possibility of being able to download a copy onto one's hard drive for future reference? Because who knows how long they'll be up there.
I have, well, that's what Garza was doing. Garza became very adept at either downloading these, finding them on the internet or downloading them, or finding them in digital catalogs and ordering the data, the PDF data version. Yeah.
Okay.
And getting, obtaining PDF copies of them and then sending them to me. And I have thousands of pages of Hebrew manuscripts of New Testament books that were sent to me by Al Garza to research. And
sounds like you got your work cut out for you. You haven't went through them all yet, have you?
I have.
Oh, you have? Okay, so
I have.
Is there still translations to be done that you want to do?
Oh yeah. There's still work to be done. I wish I had more time to do more work on it, but I have to struggle to pay the rent.
So tell me how people can follow your work. You got a YouTube channel and a Substack. I want you to give that out again. And also, how can people support this work and research you're doing?
So they can donate by going to the donate link on nazarenespace.com/blog. And there's a donate link there. They can go to my Substack. Almost all my articles have a link at the bottom where you can donate. And my Substack, which is James Scott Trimm, it's all one word, James Scott Trimm with two M's, .substack.com. There's a paid tier, but there's also free material. But almost every blog, almost every article has a link at the bottom on how to donate. And we do need your donations. We are in a very difficult financial situation with my wife. She's disabled, she's chronically ill, and she suffers chronic pain, and I'm her at-home caretaker in addition to all of this.
So you have, as part of the donate system, you have PayPal. Do you have Cash App also?
We have PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, and a GoFundMe. So
okay, so what's the main place to go to, the Substack or your website, or both?
Both. And if you go to Nazarene Judaism, we have more than one website. We have NazareneJudaism.com, and the top of that also links to the Substack. I'm doing a lot of work on the Substack these days. That's, I think, probably my main home these days is the Substack. So
I love Substack. You know, there's not the censorship that I found in other platforms, and I've gravitated towards it too. Folks, you can sign up for a Substack. You can also go over to youtube.com/@Rabbi Trimm. Is that your official YouTube channel?
It is.
Rabbi Trimm? Okay, and then you're on Facebook too. Now, I'm going to put this in the show notes. And what's the, in closing here, what are you currently working on right now? Is there a new book you're just finishing or getting ready to write? What's next?
I've got a book on philosophy I'm working on my hard drive. I got a new commentary to 1 Corinthians I'm working on my hard drive. I'm working on a reconstruction of the ancient Nazarene, the halakhic system of the ancient Nazarenes. I'm working on converting all of my books. I will be putting them out as ebooks in the near future and audiobooks. So I've got lots on working on getting books up as audio on Audible, and within the next 30 days, maybe even the next week to 2 weeks, you may be seeing some of that happen. So,
well, that would be great, because I was able to purchase a couple of your books, and I had my cousin bring them in last November to Japan, where I was meeting him, and I've got a couple of them that way in a suitcase. So being in Indonesia, it's kind of difficult to get certain books in through customs. I would love to be able to order an ebook. So I think to have that option, ebook and paperback, would be great, and audiobook's cool too. Folks, get over to Brother James' YouTube channel, sign up. You've got some really great teaching over there. I'm enjoying it. And how often are you planning to broadcast on YouTube? How often do you put up videos?
I haven't put out a video in probably a month on YouTube. I probably need to get another one out. I'm also going to be starting in the very near future podcasting on Substack.
Oh, yeah.
I used to have a podcast that was actually on the radio.
Yes.
I was actually broadcasting on some radio stations back 20 years ago. I had a show called Truth Talk, and a little while after that, I had one called Clear Truth. So I'm going to start doing that again on Substack. In the very near future, you'll start seeing podcasts from me as well.
Man, I love that. Let me know, and we're going to promote it for you. Folks, I want to come on board and help Brother James out in his ministry every month. I encourage you to do the same. And James, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. I want to get you back on again next month. So find me a date. And would you like to close us in prayer tonight?
Sure. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Yahweh, our King of the universe, who has blessed us and granted us his Torah, your Torah, and your instruction and your guidance, and given us the opportunity to fellowship with one another and study in your word. B'Shem Yeshua Meshikenu, in the name of Yeshua our Messiah. Amen.
My friend, we love and appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. Give our regards to Sister Trimm, and we'll see you next time. God bless you, my friend.
Shavua Tov.
Shalom. Folks, that was James Trimm. So many questions to ask. in so little time. So we went for short replies tonight. We could have went verbose on any one of these and spent a whole program. But, I mean, this is just exciting to me. And, it's good to have a love and desire to get into the Word. That's being a good Berean. They search the Scriptures daily to see if what Paul and others preached was in the Word of God. And what were they searching? The New Testament had not been written at that time. They were searching the OT. And so, praise God. And so, as we get in the Word, we renew our mind through the hearing of God's Word. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Encourage everybody to get in and do a Bible study. And that's on my list. I already bought a course a couple years ago off of like Udemy. And I'm going to begin to go through it. It's biblical Hebrew. It's like, work at your own pace. All these pre-recorded video teachings. I mean, that's really what I want to do right now at 56 years old. In my spare time is study biblical Hebrew and learn a scream of stick fighting. Got to have a hobby. Amen. Read the Word of God to them, and if they don't want to receive it, hit them over the head with a rattan stick. Just kidding. Boy, the old school nerd came out tonight. It's good to talk to a fellow nerd because that's all I was about until I was about 18, and then I was a senior in high school. Decided I need to get a girlfriend. And I can't meet a girlfriend if I'm on this Atari 800. So I packed up my beloved Atari 800 XL with all my games, put it in the closet, and I started riding motorcycles. Bought a dirt bike from my uncle. Worked after school, and I didn't pick up the computer again for a few years. And that was probably about the time the web began to be birthed. I remember when it came out, and I remember not having a computer. I'd sold my Atari 800 later on, and I went down to like a thrift store, and I bought me an IBM PC XT. And, of course, it could barely run current software. That was about the birth of the CD-ROM games. You remember that? And I got this thing, and I said, I'm going to set up a bulletin board. This was about 92, 93. And I bought me a copy of Wildcat BBS, and it happened to work on this IBM PC XT. And I started a bulletin board. Domains had just become a thing, and you could get a free domain. There was no GoDaddy at that point. You just call this number, and you could register the domain, and I registered this domain called earthnet.com. I figured I'm going to set me up a BBS called EarthNet Online. And that was really my first opportunity to be a sysop. Although, 7 years earlier, I used to log on to other people's bulletin boards with my 300 baud modem. Now we were in the age of 14.4, and I think 28.8, and remember the 56K? Yeah, that was awesome. And look at where we've come now. I remember the first webcam. It looked like an eyeball. What was that? It was called the Quick Cam. At any rate, I had a bulletin board for a while with one phone line connected to it. And years later, I would get stupid, and someone contacted me and said, hey, I saw you on earthnet.com. Well, you want to sell it? And I said, how much you want to pay? And he said, well, let me just see what I got in my pocket. How about $300? And I sold this thing for $300 like back in 96. And turns out this dude had this big ISP in Colorado, EarthNet. Anyway, I sold that. I've sold a couple domains over the years. I had 500 at one time. I don't hold that many anymore. It's a lot of money for renewal, but I think I still got about 20 domains. But it wasn't until the birth of the Bitcoin and me getting into the game late, about 2017, and I'm about to end the story, deciding one day to look in to see what John McAfee was doing. He was back in the States from Belize by that time. And he said, Bitcoin is fixing to go over $1,800 a coin. And I said, whoa, it's all about crypto apparently. But everybody says, too late to mine crypto. You missed it. What do you mean it's too late? People didn't know what they were talking about. 10 years ago, they were saying it's over with. Are you kidding me? The crypto gold rush was just about to begin. And when I discovered cryptocurrency, it was like I was teleported back to the 15-year-old Omega Man. At that time, I was known as Mad Max from the Mel Gibson movie. And I felt the same joy, the nerd was reborn in me. And all I wanted to do was find someone who could build a mining rig for me. And after a trip to Malaysia for a visa run, yielded nothing. I come back, and right here in Bali, I walked into this mall, and I went up this escalator, and there it was, a mining rig on the ground. And we had at one point like 6 mining rigs. I think I had 23 GPU cards. Never made any money. Sadly, I should have just started buying and selling crypto scalping. That's really the way to go. But it was the nerd came back. I had not felt that joy since 1986, 1985. It was 1983, really. That's when I got that TI. And I had a little cassette recorder, record my games on. War games. Brings back fond memories. I don't feel that way about computers today. Kids don't feel that way that we felt having one of those computers for Christmas, whether it had been the TI or the Atari or Commodore 64. My friends had the VIC-20 also, or the Apple II, or the TRS-80. Remember those two? They're just no fun in a laptop today. No fun. And, of course, I don't think there's going to be much fun for much longer for gamers, because I understand that Sony has just said they're going to stop making physical media. It's all going to be cloud-based. And if you owned any of the Sony movies, they deleted like 500 of them. Literally, it's going by the globalist playbook. You own nothing and be happy. I'm not happy about that. I want physical media. I still want cartridges. Give me a Blu-ray. I don't want a game and it says you got to download it. Hell no. I'm done right now. Got me pissed off. I'm going to drink some coffee. No, I wasn't. I didn't have any computer skills, Dave, like that. I just wanted to write a War Games program. Literally, that's what I did. I saw the War Games movie, and I just wanted to write a basic program where you had to enter in a password. The problem on the TI-99 and most computers, just hit Control-C. It would break the program. What you needed was the extended basic cartridge, which was like $100, $150. You could buy at Toys R Us. And then that had additional commands that you could disable the Control-C. Now you had a real password program. And then I began to get the games like Parsec and all those games. And simultaneously, I'm trading games that I would then play at school, after school, on the Atari 800. Became president of the computer club just so I could have access to the computer, and they had a little fun, and I would buy floppy disk and collect more games. There wasn't much to our meetings, just collecting games. Had like 500 games, and then moved to Texas, and I got my first. I started working at 13. That was my first job. But then I got a job working at Skaggs Alpha Beta in Plano, Texas. And I would work weekends there and sometimes after school and take all my money. I started making some good money in 10th and 11th grade, like $80 a week. It's a lot of money. And I would go to Babbage's when I didn't have to work and buy games. And then I ended up, got an Atari 800 XL for Christmas, had no disk drive. So now I'm working. I had my stepfather order me the Porsche of the Atari 800 worlds, called the Indus GT disk drive. It was black, had this little hydraulic actuated plastic door in the front. Open up, then you pop in your 5 1/4 disc. Got me my 300 baud modem. And now it was like, every hour that I didn't have to work or go to school, I was on that computer. Now I had all the games. And then met a computer nerd named Wayne. And he had a wife named Trina. She was Mexican, weighed about 400 pounds. And he would come over. He would drive over in his truck. And he loved McDonald's, but he didn't love emptying his trash. So I go out there to meet him on the driveway. And he'd get out of his truck, and his whole passenger side was filled with McDonald's Coke cups and bags. I mean, that was like his trash can. He would come in. He wouldn't take a shower. He was a real nerd. Greasy hair. I'm like 15. He was like 23, but he was a computer nerd like me, and he would come over and he would show me some of the newest games and ask me what I had, and we would trade. And Big Trina, God bless her, she would go into the bathroom and she sat on the toilet seat and broke our toilet seat right off. He was skinny. She was big. He loved a big woman. Nothing wrong with a big woman. You got more to squeeze. Amen? More to love with those rolls of fat. You don't want a woman that looks like a skeleton. Do I hear an amen? Got to have something to squeeze. Squeeze those rolls of fat on the waist. And, these are fond memories I'm reliving right now. I had a waterbed. With my money, I got HBO in my room on this old color TV. I was living large in the world of the 8-bit computer. And, on a weekend, I went over to a friend. He had a Texas Instrument, an Apple IIc. I brought over my Atari 800 XL, and we had 3 computers going on at once. And then I got a call. You're supposed to be at work today. I'm sick. You're fired. I got fired from Toys R Us. It's very true. Because I wanted to hang out with my friends. And I was like, dang, every weekend I've got to work. I want to be with my friends. I'm not going into work. I called in sick. They fired me. And that's going to end my story today. Okay, folks, love you all. Thank you for tuning in. What do we got coming up tomorrow? Let me look at the schedule. Let me see if we got any early bird show for you as we're closing. You can also look at the schedule on my Substack. Okay, let's see. No show in the morning, but we're going to be back tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, speaking my word, and first-time guest, prayer walker Dan Lowry. Wednesday morning, however, and Thursday morning, we're going to be doing 10 a.m. shows. I've got Michael Cummins coming back from England, and Doug Suter, the prayer walker, and we got more going on this week. Love and appreciate you all. If you want to support the broadcasting, do so on our website. Thank you again. With your help, we were able to turn Podomatic back on. We've got 95% of all the shows we've done up there on Podomatic up through about January. So I've got some to upload for you. Probably another 100. Get us caught up to speed. But thank God I don't have to do that whole task again. I didn't know what to do. I was trying to put them up on YouTube. YouTube flagged me for an old show. They said medical disinformation from 2014. I mean, good grief. Warned me if I get another warning, it's a strike. I said, well, I'm not going to be able to go through all those shows and check them before I upload them. So YouTube's not the answer. But praise the Lord, we've been able to salvage Podomatic. I also have, for season 16, SoundCloud. So there's a way to get these programs commercial-free. Download them all. Enjoy them. And with that, God bless you. And I'll see you next time on Omega Man Radio. This show will be up in the live tab immediately. God bless you all. In Jesus' name.
Calling a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executeth my counsel from a far country. Yes, I have spoken it. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. You are listening to Mega Man with Shannon Ray Davis. Jesus Christ is Lord, and no demon is safe. listening to OMEGAMAN with Shannon Ray Davis. Jesus Christ is Lord, and no demon is safe. Listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. The Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword, in the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft, in his quiver hath he hid me. You are listening to the Shannon Davis Podcast. Jesus Christ is Lord. No demon is safe. You are listening to the Shannon Davis Broadcast. Jesus Christ is Lord. No demon is safe.